Welcome to the Canadian Institute of Forestry's National Electronic Lecture Program. My name is Sharon Young, and I'll be hosting today's session. Today is Thursday, April 16th, 2026, and this is the first session in the E-Lecture series entitled Growing Climate Resilient Urban Forests, Species Selection and Assisted Migration Strategies. This series is brought to you by Tree Canada, and CIF-IFC is very pleased to collaborate with Dr. Adrina Bardakjian and the team at Tree Canada to host these webinars. Today's webinar is titled Highlighting Underutilized Trees for Urban Settings. A special reminder that the ISA-certified arborists are eligible to receive one continuing education unit for this webinar. Please email electures@cififc.org with your full name and your ISA certified ID in order to obtain the ISA Continuing Education Unit. Once we verify your attendance, we'll send your information to ISA for them to process. Today, we have Kaylee Hatt-Taylor, Coordinator of Research and Engagement from Tree Canada, to introduce today's e-lecture speaker. With that, I will now pass it over to Kaylee.
Thanks, Sharon, and good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. On behalf of Tree Canada, I just wanted to thank you again for taking the time to join us today for the first session in this e-lecture series. We're very pleased to be bringing together forestry professionals to explore climate resilient urban forests through these topics like species selection, assisted migration strategies, and integrating functional traits in planting and planning. This is a topic that we've heard time and time again from our colleagues is a top priority, so I'm really pleased to see it come to fruition in this series. As always, I want to thank Sharon and the team at CIF for their help in coordinating the series today and their continued partnership on these series. And with that, I'll introduce today's speaker, Ryan Munroe. Ryan has worked in the forestry and horticultural sectors for almost 15 years. He started out tree planting in Northern Ontario and went on to complete a master's in forest conservation. He worked as a nursery and landscape research technician at Vineland Research and Innovation Centre from 2016 until 2022, when he joined NVK Nurseries to lead the nursery's plant health team. Thank you, Ryan, for sharing your time and insights with us today. You can go ahead with your presentation.
Thanks very much, Kaylee, and thank you, Sharon. Just before I get started, I did give a similar talk to this 2 months ago at the ISA Ontario conference. So for those of you who may have caught that in person, it will be similar, but I'm going to leave lots of opportunity for questions, go into the details on different tree selections I'm proposing here that we look at for urban plantings. And yeah, I hope that we can have a bit of a conversation. The first part of the talk is going to be on really the background and what scientific information, what research has been done, helping us make better selections for urban settings. And then the last part of the presentation will be going through some different options based on a survey I conducted this past winter. For those of you who aren't familiar with NVK Nurseries, I joined NVK back, fall 2022. So I had been at Vineland Research and Innovation Center for 6.5 years. That's near St. Catharines. Horticulture was a bit of a new world for me. I had come from more of a background working in, doing the tree planting for 3 seasons up north, doing the Masters of Forest Conservation. I thought I'd probably end up doing some kind of forest ecology work, maybe work for a conservation authority or something like that. I didn't know that I'd end up working in horticulture and in ornamental horticulture with all these cultivars and non-native plants and as well as native. Just such a wide diversity, but it's been it's been fun. I've gotten to combine my interest in soils, soil science, and then kind of the environmental tolerances or the habitat, the climatic preferences of different tree species, and really get a firsthand view at NVK, which is a 1,200-acre wholesale nursery, of how these different tree selections, these different species and cultivars are performing across 14 different farms that we have. So it's quite the opportunity. I'm grateful for it every season. I get to monitor all our tree plantings, keep track of how they're growing, any health issues they're having, and more we call it shrink in the industry, but basically any losses, mortalities we have, and try to figure out the reasons why. But yeah, for those of you who don't know NVK Nurseries, we grow trees, shrubs, perennials, evergreens, basically any kind of ornamental plant. We've really picked up on the native trend the last number of years because there's just much more demand for native plants. So we've definitely increased our supply of native plants, working with local seed collectors, working with organizations like Forest Canada. So I'll keep moving. If anyone has more questions about NVK, I'll give you guys a bit more context as we go. The motivation behind this talk really comes from the question of, I think we need to start at the question of why do we actually want greater tree diversity in cities? And I understand that this series is about climate change and maybe assisted migration, species migration. But a lot of where my perspective comes from having worked with a lot of urban forestry departments, urban foresters, th during my time at Vineland and now at NVK. I'm still in contact with many of them. It's the real struggle for getting a diverse suite of species that are very urban tolerant in all kinds of different settings, almost like different microclimates, different roadside settings where they're exposed to salt, compaction, all the kind of nitty-gritty details that need to be considered in urban planting. So the way that in the past, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with these examples, but in the past that urban planners, urban forestry departments kind of were able to deal with these urban conditions without having really complicated species lists and planting plans, is they just pick kind of the bulletproof or what seemed like the bulletproof species. So that was like, American elm in the past, Ulmus americana, or ash more recently. And because they were such easy, tolerant trees, both tolerant to drought, salt, compaction, poor drainage, all of these conditions that we face in urban settings, we overplanted them. And then we had Dutch elm disease come through and wipe out from the latest stats that I read a number of years ago was roughly, they estimate around 60% of the entire population. Very costly for cities to have to deal with these mass removals. And then obviously all these neighborhoods then lose all their wonderful elms or ash trees or all the canopy cover that they used to have and enjoy. So my answer to this question is why, and I think many people would say the same thing, is that we want to hedge against any major pest and disease outbreaks that come in. Asian longhorn beetle is a big one that would affect maples, elms, birches, all kinds of genera of trees, but also against climate change, the changing climate patterns. The very, very hot summers we've had, at least in Southern Ontario. And now, you guys have probably gathered at this point, like I've been in Southern Ontario for 10 years, well, 15 years, including school. So I'm very much speaking within the Southern Ontario context. And I'm sorry about that. I know this is a national audience. But yeah, just to let you know, I'm definitely coming from a Southern Ontario context where these have been where we have certain species that we can plant, and we have actually a lot more opportunity to plant a wider variety of species than a lot more colder regions of Canada. But I think what I'm looking for is a diverse cityscape, a diverse urban forest that can withstand both changes in pests and disease that come in and really affect certain species or genera, or those changing conditions. And we at the ISA conference, Ontario conference, I went to a couple months ago. There was a guest speaker from Bartlett Tree Lab, Chad Rigsby. Dr. Chad Risby gave a couple talks, and he talked about how a whole bunch of, especially evergreens, spruce and pine, and others have been pretty devastated by certain fungal pathogens and other diseases because of the changing climate, because how hot and humid and longer summers have been. So that really reduces the palette of species that we can choose from, and that affects deciduous trees too. There's some classic Canadian trees like jack pine. Like jack pine doesn't do well down here. Black spruce, I mean, obviously it's a little too far south, but even those species that just they can't quite tolerate anymore those really long, hot, humid summers that we tend to have now. I'll keep moving here so we can get to some of the species that I want to highlight. But before I do that, I want to give you guys a bit more context into how I got interested in this topic and how it's kind of evolved over time for me and the opportunities I've gotten to work with in urban forestry and helping select good choices for different urban sites. So I had the opportunity back when I was at Vineland. I think it was about 2019 or so, 2018, 2019. My coworker Jason Henry and I worked on building a pretty comprehensive database that was basically a urban tree species selector tool where we scoured the internet. We found all the good sources we could. There were some scientific sources based on research data, and a lot of other ones were anecdotal. And we were really targeting, can we give ratings to drought tolerance? Can we give ratings to flooding tolerance? Salt tolerance? Can we give ratings to, well, those are the big ones. pH tolerance. Those are the big ones we were looking at. We're also looking at things like growth rate, the basic stuff, mature size. But we really tried to be comprehensive, and I was happy to hear Vineland they got a small, some kind of portion of funding to redo the website, make it a little bit more user friendly. Again, get a little bit of better data. So if you use the QR code there, you'll get access to Vineland's tree species selector website. I highly recommend it. Yeah, 213 different species included, quite comprehensive, and it helps you select for different types of sites. So here's, in case you missed the QR code on the last page, here's another one. But the whole idea behind developing this database is that we found that the resources for, we're always educated to put the right tree in the right place. And then I like to always add with the right aftercare because that's so critical after transplant, um, getting water, properly protected from line trimmers, that kind of thing. Uh, but putting the right tree in the right place is not always so simple when we have very complex urban settings. We've got different salt loads, whether it's soil salt or salt spray. We've got we've got soil types and textures that may indicate that they're very well drained. But because urban soils are so modified, we could have different layers of fill or topsoil or native. I mean, it's really a mess out there. So understanding your drainage, for instance, is really critical. And so that's why we wanted to have a good resource that could tell you, maybe if not definitively, then at least with a good amount of confidence that that a I'm trying to think of a less common species, but we'll get into them in a minute. But that a certain species can tolerate these particular conditions on site. Now, along with that, we'd always recommend, and I still always recommend, doing a bit of soil testing. You don't have to dig a pit as large as Jason's standing in there. So Jason still leads the soils lab at Vineland. So he was my coworker that we initially built this database together. Um, and he offers all kinds of different soil testing, but I mean, you really need that soil testing to go alongside your species selection. And then obviously considering the whole environment where you're going to be planting. Um, he said so I've always been pushing Jason, like, promote your services. At NVK Nurseries, we use Vineland all the time for soil testing because they offer tests that other agricultural labs don't offer that are quite valuable. For instance, a relatively inexpensive texture test that just tells us the sand, silt, and clay percentage. That's great. Soil respiration test, and then things like pH and EC. They don't do all the nutrients, but they do those key tests. So then moving into, the question of what actually makes a good or a tough city tree. I like to take a lot of photos when I see good examples. Um, and down here in Southern Ontario, we've got Gladitsia triacanthus or honey locust it's overused at this point because it's such a tough tree. So that's on the left. It's good for parking lot islands. It's really good for any location where you have a combination of salt load, um, droughty conditions, some poor drainage, some compaction. It's just tough as nails. Doesn't mean it will grow large in that setting. It may stay quite stunted, but it's just very tough for those reasons. Kentucky coffee tree or Gymnocladus dioicus is also in the middle there. As from my understanding, it's a native tree to the very southern part of Ontario, but it's widespread throughout the eastern United States. From my understanding, what I heard is that an urban forester or someone at the City of Toronto, maybe 15 years ago, or maybe a little bit more, started trialing it out, and it did so well that it's kind of just spread everywhere, at least in southern Ontario. Most urban forestry departments are speccing this one regularly, and it's just very drought tolerant. It transplants very easily. We grow them, whether they're bare root or container or ball and burlap trees. They transplant very readily, and they handle all these tough conditions. Maybe not super poor drainage, but all those other urban conditions, they can handle it. Ginkgo, we have lots of different ginkgo cultivars, ginkgo biloba. Slow growing tree, but it's been used. It's not providing. I mean, I know the big knock on it is it's not providing any food for insects or really much good habitat for wildlife, but it can handle. It does handle urban conditions very well. Doesn't handle poor drainage well. We've learned that the hard way on some of our fields. Definitely, you want the drainage to be reasonably good, but it can handle drought and salt load and that kind of stuff. Some compaction. Just a couple more examples. Zelkova serrata on the left-hand side there. For those of you who pay attention to pruning, branch structure and pruning, it's a bit of a nightmare. You have a lot of included branches, tight branches that are hard for arborists to deal with, but it is a very tough, drought-tolerant, urban-tolerant species that we use. Again, an elm, probably a hybrid elm in the middle there. I'm not sure which elm it is. So we still use lots of elms. Like I know I've been hearing more recently that from some municipalities that they're getting some disease issues with elms, and definitely we've seen our sales of elms go down in the last few years. Still a very, very good option for certain sites. Very aggressive grower, hard to manage with pruning. But it's been used in the past. We use elm and elm cultivars and hybrids again. And then Celtis occidentalis or hackberry, another native tree on the right-hand side, very popular now. Again, it tolerates drought and it tolerates poor drainage quite well once it's established. So those are the recurring themes. Not every urban tree can tolerate both drought and flooding or temporary flooding or poor drainage, but those that can, we find are quite adaptable and obviously our go-to picks. Now, the question is, I've showed you some of the most popular ones. In Southern Ontario, we do have other choices, other common urban trees, but we are trying to hedge. Again, we are definitely every urban forestry department. We're not that far off from having to cut down all those ash trees. So every urban forestry department is still very focused on getting a good diversity of trees. Now, how do they get the trees that they want is the next question that I'm posing. And that's always been, we were aware of that at Vineland years ago when I was at Vineland. Vineland since kind of formed a unique kind of research consortium to address some of those challenges. But so actually didn't realize that was going to be the photo. I thought this was going to be something else. But so Vineland's Green in the Landscape Research Consortium, I think it launched about 4 or 5 years ago. And it's a self-funded group, mainly composed of conservation authorities, municipalities. NVK Nurseries is a member, another nursery, a couple, it's a smattering of the urban tree value chain, basically, that has decided we can kick in some money to do our own research if we can't get big government grants. And it's very specific research sometimes that we want to do. So it's a great group to belong to. And a lot of what we are doing, this is just one question that the consortium is trying to answer and trying to move forward on. How do these cities that are members, or any city really, get more of the trees that they want, the quality they want, the species, the genetics, local seed source, all those kinds of questions. And just in case there are any, I'm not sure of the audience that's on here today, but for those who aren't too familiar with how the like ornamental horticulture, like nursery industry works, is because we grow such a huge diversity of plant material, and NVK Nurseries is a good example of a nursery that wants to basically grow or sell almost everything that we possibly can. Sourcing sourcing the seed or the genetics or the liners, the smaller plugs, or the bare root trees of all of these different trees that are going to end up in the landscape is no small feat. So we're kind of cobbling together availability of all these different urban trees that we end up growing in our field or growing into containers. We're cobbling them together from everywhere we can get them. That includes growing a lot of it ourselves from locally collected seed, or purchasing from other local Ontario nurseries. Like there's a lot of them close to us. South Pelham Nursery grows a lot for us. Verbinen's Nursery, it's a native plant nursery, grows a lot of seedlings for us. Not specifically for us, but we buy a lot of them. But then we do need to fill the void of all these other ornamental trees that, for instance, we might not be able to grow very well or very efficiently at a young age. So Oregon in the States is really the epicenter of tree liner production. So they have massive fields of bare root trees. They also have some nurseries that specialize in container trees. And we are fulfilling, us and many others across North America really are fulfilling a lot of their liner needs from these big suppliers like Schmidt, Frank Schmidt in Oregon, Heritage Seedlings. There's a whole bunch of them out there. Robinson Nursery. So that's just a bit of background for those of you who might not be familiar. So when a city like City of Toronto, for instance, wants to make sure that they're getting native trees and shrubs that have been sourced from certain seed zones or certain areas, relatively close to the city, rather than getting genetics from out of province or out of country. They've come up with a pretty unique arrangement with it used to be Forest Ontario, now it's Forest Canada. With Forest Canada kind of being an intermediary, and so NVK, we're growing on contract for the City of Toronto, but Forest Canada is helping us make sure we're getting all the seed that we need, or getting the liners of the trees and shrubs. We're growing those in containers. And then it's kind of a unique arrangement. So I put a question mark there. It's not a common arrangement. We like doing it. We've got a good relationship with Mark McDermott at Forest Canada and others. And the flexibility of the contract allows us to grow what they need and what they want, but be able for the City of Toronto to, for instance, if they don't want to take everything of certain species, they can take maybe a little bit reduced numbers. We can sell the rest just kind of to our other customers. But it's a unique arrangement to kind of get the quality, quantity, and genetics that they're looking for. So I promise I'm going to get to kind of highlighting all these underutilized tree species, but just one quick slide before I kind of get into that. So this is a image of Caryovata or shagbark hickory, very high demand tree that also happens to be slow growing and low availability across the industry. And so I kind of go through a couple of different scenarios as to why that is. So the option one for whoever, if it's a conservation authority, municipality, or anyone trying to buy this tree, if we have enough of them, obviously they'll reach out. We have the availability. We can sell them. That's fine. Usually that's not the case. Often we're selling out. We can try to broker those. For those of you who aren't familiar with the brokering process, a lot of the nurseries will broker from each other. If they're short in something, they can broker from another local nursery to fulfill that. If they have shagbark hickory. If they don't, then we're looking farther afield, checking with the customer. Are you okay with us getting Caryovata from somewhere else? The genetics aren't going to be the same. Maybe they don't want that. Then we look at increasing production. Unfortunately, Caryovata is a very difficult species, very heavy taprooter, hard to grow, very slow. So I'll give you some context of if we were to try to increase production in a major way, it still may take 1 to 3 years to get enough, say 1 to 2 gallon trees. If we buy, say we buy 1-year-old seedlings, or we start them from seed, because they're so slow growing, we might not have them rooted out and ready to sell for 1 to 3 years. Similar concept with the 10 to 15 gallon trees that are becoming, I think, a little bit more popular. They're more affordable, easier to handle to plant in tight urban settings where there's limited soil volume to plant into. So I give 1 to 6 years, but really it's more like 6 years, because getting these liners, if they're bare root, they don't tend to transplant well at all. We have to cut off so much of their root system. So really it's looking at starting from seed, and then growing that up, and then making sure the root systems get managed properly, and really getting something that's with a reasonable height and caliper on it could probably takes up to 6 years. And then we're looking at 3 to 10 years for a field growing wire basket tree, 50 mil. Yeah, you easily add another 4 years on top of that, depending. Now, if you're more flexible with a smaller size, then we can shave a little bit of time off of that. Okay, so that's kind of all the background. I know that took a little while, but I thought it was important. But now I'm going to just kind of give you guys the background as to what's led to this list I'm going to go through of some tree species. So these are my research sources that I've gathered over the last number of years. So some recent books and species selector tools. So I know anyone in horticulture knows Michael Durr, professor at University of Georgia, and Keith Warren is a grower and breeder at J. Frank Schmidt, or I think he's retired now, but so they wrote a great book together, very comprehensive. It's pretty anecdotal, but it's still got lots of information on very less common species and cultivars. The Essential Tree Selection Guide, Henrik Wojerman from Sweden heads up a botanical garden there, but it's also like a tree hunter. So he goes out and finds unique trees that aren't in the horticultural trade and tries to bring them into the trade. But he's also done a lot of research on drought tolerance. So there's some great information in that guide. I highly recommend both those books. Of course, Vineland's Species Selector Tool, and the research we've done on that. And then and Dr. Andrew Hirons from the UK. He was also involved in doing actual drought tolerance testing, like with that, collecting actual data, basically measuring the point at which the leaves of different trees lose their turgor pressure, so basically their permanent wilting point. They collected data on hundreds of tree species at this point, which is very powerful and very helpful for us. But he's also done work on flooding tolerance, so he's taken the torch in that sense. So he'll be coming to NVK Nurseries September 17th to participate in an event we're having, and he's going to do a workshop the day before. So it's the first time I'm plugging that. My observations over the last 10 years as well kind of feed into this, but because I work at a company that sells trees, I didn't want this talk to be Ryan's picks for urban tree selections. I really want it to be definitely less biased. I do definitely have my biases. I live in Hamilton. I see how trees do in Hamilton area. So what I did is I reached out to 10 arborists, 3 department heads of botanical gardens, some landscape designers, contractors, nursery growers, researchers, urban foresters. And I did a survey, and I asked them for their top 3 picks for underutilized tree species for street trees. And I asked them for their top 3 picks for park trees. And I got a really good response. I got responses from 37 of them. And these are all people, in my view, I either know them or I know of them. I know that they're passionate about trees, that they're observant. They've paid attention over the years to what trees are doing well. It is a little bit context dependent. Some of them are in the west. Some of them are in the West Coast. Most of them are in kind of Eastern North America, though. So for context. So let me pause for a moment. If there's any questions, I can take a couple now, and if not, I'll kind of blast through the selections that the survey turned up. Well, it's a long question. Let me try to quickly read it. Yes, so a lot of horticultural cultivars for sale at NVK. What are my thoughts on protecting ecological integrity by providing true native trees to the public for urban forestry purposes? And then there's more context there, but I from Ashley. Um, but yeah, our thoughts are absolutely, and like that's why we've really tried to connect more with we needed the seed collection side to be bolstered. So we've connected with, in the last few years, we've connected with a few trusted seed collectors, and having that connection with Forest Canada as well, and their network of seed collectors has been very helpful for providing so true native trees. We sell lots of true native trees. So there's two different things. So there's one, like I mentioned, like there's lots of native trees that have become very popular for urban settings. Kentucky coffee tree, hackberry. I mean, red maple has always been pretty popular. Honey locust is kind of native to Southern Ontario. See, a lot of these are Southern Ontario natives. Um, it's a matter of whether we're going to the next level and asking, are the genetics from right around here as well? And for, I would argue for a lot of the Carolinian species that are hardy to maybe zone 5 or 5B. Um, I'm talking about black gum, Nyssa sylvatica, or some others. Then the genetics become quite important for hardiness, especially. So we've really put in some effort into being able to source local seed, especially for those species. We know that there's demand and interest in having locally sourced seed for all native species, and we're working to fulfill that. But it's rather complicated to be able to do that. And I can't go into all of it right now. Maybe at the end, maybe we can discuss it more, but I think for now I'll move on and say, yeah, we are aware of that and we're working towards that. Okay. So I'm going to run through some picks from the survey that I conducted. And I'll start with, I'm going to go in alphabetical order by Latin name. That's how we do it at the nursery. Abies concolor, white fir, native to the western part of North America. From the survey, 2 out of 37 participants suggested it as a street tree, which was interesting. We don't do a lot of evergreens as street trees. One suggested it for a park setting. Sorry, I thought there was more to that. So I'm going to yeah, most native firs that we have uh, are not drought tolerant at all. They don't like necessarily even being fully exposed to the wind and sun. And so Abies concolor is a bit of an exception. It's tougher. It's more drought tolerant. It's got a little bit of salt tolerance apparently. It's something to look at. It's also got that blue color, which for aesthetic reasons with, we do struggle with needle cast with blue spruce and other kinds of spruce. Looking at Abies concolor, maybe trying it out, seeing how it does in some different settings, I would recommend it. This was Dr. Chad Rigsby, also from the States, a couple of months ago at ISA. He also recommended Abies concolor from what he's seen down all throughout Eastern and Midwest United States, seeing how badly the spruce are doing in those hotter summers. He recommends trying Abies concolor. Paperbark maple, it's a non-native ornamental. I have quite a few of those included in here. So Acer gracium, only 1 out of 37 recommended it for street trees. The reason I included it, a lot of urban foresters are always on the lookout for small form to go under hydro or to fit in tight spaces. This is an extremely slow growing, but pretty tough tree. It's actually quite drought tolerant, and I've had that confirmed from some other people that have experience observing this tree over time. I would give it some consideration if you're really desperate for some small form. I mean, as the aesthetics of it are great with the bark and everything. Limbing it up, us being able to limb it up in the nursery is really hard. It grows so slowly. It's going to need to be limbed up once it's outplanted. So that's the funny comment I got from one survey participant out west is that they planted everywhere. And I think it's Portland, Oregon. And he said they're a hazard for poking people in the eye if they don't limb them up enough. He says they do great. They're a very tough tree, probably overplanted out there at this point. Carpinus caroliniana or musclewood, and nice native tree for it. All the native trees, I'll put their range maps on the bottom right. This one, there's pretty big call for it in the nursery. We have a hard time keeping up with demand. It has some production challenges. It's a little bit slow to put on caliper and height, and it transplants not great poor bare root, but we are trying to keep up with demand. The survey, it was very popular in the survey. 5 out of 37 said tried in the streetscape. 2 out of 37 said the park. The only knock, I think the only major knock on this one is that it's reportedly salt sensitive. So I'd love to hear feedback from anyone who either has it exposed to at least some level of salt from the street and can report back whether it's done well or not. I don't see it planted in locations right next to where there's big salt loads, so I can't comment on it. But I think it's definitely worth trying. A lot of the salt tolerance information that's out there is still quite anecdotal. Caryovado, that shagbark hickory, I've already talked about. Huge demand for this one, and that came through in the survey as well. Just a lot of people think we should use this in the park more often, and I agree. And we're really working hard at the nursery to be able to supply more. And not just at our nursery, a lot of nurseries are working pretty diligently on this species to try to make it more available. Just so many production challenges with it. And they're going to be a bit more expensive as well, but I don't think that's the issue. I think it's just getting the numbers that people want. Cladrastis kentuckiae, yellowwood, has become a little bit more popular. It's native to that kind of scattered range in the kind of southeast of the United States. Some of our survey respondents thought we should try it in the street, partly because some of them are from different cities in the US and they see it used successfully in the street setting. And then one person suggested it more in the park. The caveat on this one is that its branching structure is at this point, I think it's pretty notoriously bad. I mean, all the examples I've seen of it around Hamilton have looked kind of like the photo we see there. It's really hard to get a dominant leader unless you're really diligent about the pruning. We can get the dominant leader in the nursery, but then keeping that in the landscape, if you don't have regular pruning, becomes very challenging. So you can get splitting if just something to be aware of. I'm not saying you shouldn't use this tree. It's got some beautiful features, and it's pretty drought tolerant. It can handle a little bit of poor drainage. Apparently has some salt tolerance, but just a bit of caution. This one's very exciting. I don't know if this fits the bill for assisted migration. Like, I don't know how many thousands of years you'd have to go back for this American smoke tree to have maybe occupied parts of Ontario or parts of Canada. But I still think it's worth considering because it's apparently extremely drought tolerant. No one asked for it in the survey, but I've had my eye on this species since I was at Vineland, maybe 8 years ago, and I finally got seed for it last year. So we have some seedlings in the nursery that we're going to train up into small trees. And I like it for small form tree trials under hydro. It's kind of I'm not sure about its salt tolerance. It doesn't like poor drainage, and some other knocks on it. It's for those of you who are familiar with the European smoke bush. Now this is a tree. European one is a shrub, but this one reportedly also has kind of weak branches, so it might be, maybe some branch breakage might be a concern, but we don't know unless we try it. I just talked to a landscape architect who says it's used quite commonly in Texas and it does really well and it's got beautiful fall color. So I'll just leave it at that. We only have about 50 of them, so we'll see if anyone's interested. Eucomia ulmoides is a very functional tree. I've heard of it being used in really, really tough downtown areas where nothing else will really perform well. It keeps its nice green leaves even in droughty conditions. We had 3 respondents saying we need to try this on the streetscape a little bit more, maybe in just the most difficult downtown urban conditions. Liquid ambar stariciflua or sweet gum, not native to Canada, native to the really more like the southeast, but a very interesting species for reasons that it has both drought tolerance and flooding tolerance and some salt tolerance reportedly. So we've seen definitely a big uptick in interest in the cultivar slender silhouette. That's not necessarily for, you're not going to get any canopy coverage from that. That's for maybe high-end residential or some interesting ornamental features with that very, very narrow tree form. But there are other cultivars that could be quite promising especially for streetscapes. The issue has always been with this species is that it produces a lot of kind of 1 inch diameter spiky fruit that causes kind of tripping hazards, creates a big mess on the street. So they're still trying to breed, they call them gumballs, gumball-free sweet gum. I have heard that there's a cultivar that produces very few or hardly or maybe none, but I haven't been able to source it yet. So in the meantime, we do grow a couple other cultivars, hardy to zone 5 or 6, depending on the cultivar. Word of caution on this one, since I gave this presentation, I always ask for feedback. So we've heard from City of Hamilton that the Royal Botanical Gardens in Burlington, Hamilton, have said that this species has started moving its way into their forested area. So you see the seed set. You can't see seeds here, but it has an enormous seed set. So it may have some invasive properties. So I would caution anyone using it anywhere close to any natural areas. It's a high demand tree, to be honest. It's a slow growing tree that the nursery industry can't produce enough of. And cities have been trying to use it for different tough settings. So it might be worth considering right downtown somewhere, but yeah, a word of caution on that one. So we've got a question here. Do you have criteria for selecting storm damage resistance? We have an increase in ice storms and tornadoes now. I know Ottawa got hit real bad the last 5 years. Yeah, so I can't remember if the Vineland database includes that or not. I know back when I was at Vineland, we did populate the database with branch breakage susceptibility, we called it, and there was some decent information on that. And it's pretty well, like arborists have a very good sense of that already. They know what does well. And they also know that having regular pruning maintenance is very key to that, to preventing branch breakage and storms. So I would say I would have to double check the Vineland website. It's not something that I think about anymore now working at the nursery, but it's definitely something that I would factor into selecting for urban trees, just because it's gonna, yeah. I mean, I think we know about silver maples, for instance, and I've already mentioned some elms and Zelkova, the pruning challenges. The yellowwood, it's good to be aware of these and just know that if you're going to try some of them, you might want to be able to give them a little bit more attention with the pruning. And then there's another question around dwarf chinkapin oak. Yes, I'm getting to that one. And bur oak, or I assume that's supposed to be bur oak. I don't know what bare oak is. But if it's supposed to be bur oak, then yes, I just forgot to mention bur oak. Bur oak is widely used in urban settings and does fantastic. Okay, I'll keep moving. A few more for you guys to consider. Metasequoia glyptostroboides or Dawn redwood. They thought it was extinct in China, found a few, I think a grove of trees left. And it's just it's a fantastic tree. It's a deciduous conifer. It was quite popular in the survey. I grabbed that image from the image of the green trees from a street somewhere in Kerr Street, LA. It's in Vancouver. So the only knock on this tree, it's very drought tolerant. It's easy to establish. It's got a very aggressive root system. It can tolerate quite poor drainage, but apparently it is sensitive to salt. So I don't know how much salt they're using in this street setting in Vancouver. Probably a lot less than most of us use throughout Canada. So I'm guessing that's why they can have an alley of metasequoia. It looks beautiful. I love this tree. They have different cultivars. It's pretty sparsely kind of branched as the straight species. So they've developed this, they've bred this cultivar Jade Prince that we sell. That's just much more dense. It's still a full form large tree, but it's just much more dense, especially when it's younger. Amber Glow is kind of a smaller form metasequoia. I don't think I have the specs on it there, but I think it gets only 15 feet tall. So that could be an interesting option. I don't know if you need sight lines, you might need to limit up. That would look a little silly. But it's a beautiful, tough little tree. I'll keep moving with Nyssa sylvatica was, I think it was the most popular one. Let's take a look. Yeah, I think 11 out of the, or at least 10 out of the 37 picked it for a street tree that should be used more often. So you can see the native range throughout all like Eastern United States, a little bit through Southern Ontario. So this is one that we've been working with local seed collectors to make sure we get local seed for this one. Just because there's such a huge native range, we want to make sure the hardiness is there, at least for Southern Ontario. But this one's great for a variety of reasons. It's not only drought tolerant, it can tolerate some poor drainage. I can't remember the salt tolerance right now, actually, off the top of my head. I have a more extensive set of slides that details everything you need to know about each of these species, but I thought it would be too text heavy. So if anyone wants that, I'll have my email at the end and I can share that around. But Nyssa sylvaticus, it's very popular throughout a lot of cities in the United States. It's got, especially the cultivars that they've bred, have very, very straight dominant leaders, and then they branch out at kind of right angles, which means they're much less susceptible to branch breakage, less pruning work is needed on them. I mean, the example that I have on the far right there is from the Royal Botanical Gardens, and those leaders got split and they have two co-dominant leaders, but a lot of these black gum trees have very good form. Maybe not that one on the left either, because I don't think they got around to pruning it too much, but the one on the right's a bit better. So we sell a cultivar called Wildfire, but there's a bunch, and we're adding a few more, especially the hardier ones that might work quite well in some urban settings. Here's a fun one, Chinese ironwood or Perodia subaquilus. Very rare, like wasn't in the trade at all up until recently. So for anyone who knows Persian ironwood, it's Perodia persica. This is a very closely related tree that's hard, so reportedly hardier. So it did survive like the polar vortex in Ohio back in 2013-14. So we bought some of them. I think City of Waterloo is going to try it out. Actually, I know that they want to try it out. So we're going to find out how that does in a city like Waterloo. Reportedly hardy to zone 5. It's kind of somewhat slow growing, supposed to be quite tough, nice fall color. Quercus bicolor. I know I'm getting short on time here, but Quercus bicolor, I'll try to hurry it up. I've heard this tree does very well in our fields. The only issue it has is in soils with pH that starts getting into the high 7s or 8s, it will get chlorosis, but it's quite popular. The survey people recognized it's a good tree. You need good ways to manage the taproot on this, like when you're growing the liner. So we have some air pruning pots. If anyone's interested in those, I've got photos I can share of Quercus bicolor growing in those. Quercus prenoides, dwarf chinkapin oak, looks more like a shrub. We're trying to see if we can grow it into a really small form tree. I don't know if we'll be successful. But we did have 3 people saying that we should be looking at this. Chinkapin oak in general is not the dwarf chinkapin oak, but chinkapin oak, Quercus muhlenbergii, is reportedly a very, very drought tolerant, quite urban tolerant tree in its own right. I just included prenoides here because people mentioned it and because we're always looking for very small form trees to fit in tight spaces. Now, whether we'll be able to prune it into a tree, I have no idea. So we'll let you guys know. I'm on to the last 2 trees here so that we have some time for questions. So Taxodium bald cypress. This one, Sean Fox, who works at Verbinen's nursery, took this photo in Philadelphia. I think he said it was Philadelphia. I've seen it in Philadelphia too. I think we should be using this as a street tree. It's a swamp/floodplain species. It can handle complete inundation with water and also is very drought tolerant. So a lot of people on this survey also pointed to Taxodium as as a tree that we should be using more. It's also hardy to zone 4, so it's not like something that we have to really push the limits with hardiness. It's quite hardy, and I think Sean mentioned he's seen trees doing well in Ottawa as well. They've even got a narrow cultivar, which is handy in some cases. Lindsay Skyward, we got some of those liners in this year. And then the last, I think this is my last species, Tilia tomentosa. So lindens have been very popular historically, but from what I've heard and what I learned this winter at the ISA conferences, that aphids really loved lindens and really love lindens and create a mess, and then residents hate the fact that they have a mess on their car, and therefore people don't want lindens. And it makes sense that they're messy. So my one point about including Tilia tomentosa or silver linden is that apparently it doesn't attract the aphids. So that's what I've heard from a couple of different people now. So I think that would be worth trying if you want to still use a tough drought tolerant linden that's very urban adaptable. These silver lindens are a good option. So only one person recommended it, but I looked into it a bit more and thought it was worth promoting. I'll just kind of wrap up here, kind of reiterating what I think the collective vision is amongst a lot of members of kind of the urban forestry community, is that we want, and that's why I included this photo of what appears to be a very diverse, well-shaded streetscape, is I think we're looking for all those benefits that urban trees can provide the people that live in the cities as climate change marches on, and as summers become hotter and hotter. Like, we really need this shade. We need the stormwater retention when we have these mega storms. And again, I'm speaking from Southern Ontario context. Like, I've noticed that definitely in the last, especially 6-7 years. So I think that's really what motivates me, to try to supply good quality, diverse, if we can get native species, underutilized native species in there. To me, that's all the better. But if we have to use some non-natives, I'm also for that. Yeah, I want to thank everyone for their attention, their time. I always like to finish off with saying let's help trees reach their potential, and I'm always happy to follow up with anyone who may be interested in collaborating on a project or wants to learn more about how we grow the trees at the nursery. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ryan, for that great presentation and for taking the time to answer questions throughout. Sure.
I'll just
Sounds
read
good.
it out. So he says Nisa sylvatica, Clidrasis, Machia, liquidambar. He's seen many more planted in Montreal, southern Quebec. Do you have more rigorous info on how they survive 10, 20, 50 years down the line, or is there no choice but to wait and see? So that's, Robert, that's kind of what I want to do this coming winter, is dig deeper into this. So I just did this survey to be able to present some options to people, and it's pretty anecdotal. What I'd like to do is, and I've talked with Daniela, Daniela at University of Toronto. I can't remember how to say her last name, but Daniela at University of Toronto, who has done all kinds of monitoring on urban trees, I think across Ontario and parts of Canada. So I've talked with Daniela about maybe expanding that survey to understand, like, she looked up metasequoia, for instance, in her database to find out where are the metasequoia growing and how are they doing. So she has that kind of information. She has the size and whether they're in good health. So I want to expand that to be able to actually give people more confidence in trying some of these less common species.
Thank you, Ryan, for answering the question. At this moment, I'm not seeing any questions from our participants, but I can also ask a question.
Sure.
Looking back on your career path from tree planting to research, now to leading plant health, what experiences most shaped your perspective on urban tree diversity?
Ooh. Oh, on urban tree diversity, that's a good question. Yeah, I was pretty clueless about it until, I would say, different experiences working at Vineland. So what we did, a lot of the work I did when I was at Vineland, is kind of the perfect job to get pretty quickly out of my master's degree, is because Vineland's very focused on doing practical research that's going to help stakeholders, like basically, or fee-for-service work that's going to solve a particular problem. So a lot of the work we did was on testing, going out, sampling soils in different urban settings. So highway roadsides, new developments, old parks, new parks, different street. Like I did projects with York Region. We did projects with York Region. Yeah, I would say all those experiences combined together of just being aware of the how different a natural setting is and the soils in a natural area are to an urban area, and how many layers of different soils you can have and the kind of compaction you have to deal with. Um, that was really eye-opening. And then getting to work with, clients we had like, foresters at York, urban foresters at York Region, and I'm trying to remember which other experience. Yeah, City of Burlington, you're working with the foresters there and getting to work on different projects with them. They, installing a new, planting in a new parquet. Unfortunately, I got to go check up on that parquet because I left Vineland soon after that and I never got to follow up on it. But yeah, those experiences and then just talking to people, like all the vast experience out there from the different researchers, urban foresters, arborists, like anyone, I'm happy to have a conversation with anyone that has an interest and has observed the urban forest, and I'd love to hear what they've seen. So I think, yeah, just being curious and getting to have those experiences at Vineland was really valuable.
Thank you, Ryan. And also, please feel free to reach out if you have any follow-up questions for Ryan. All right, if there are no further questions, I'd like to bring this session to a close. Thank you all for participating in today's webinar. And once again, a big thank you to Ryan for the great presentation. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.